Ni ty, ni ja, nic smo vjerovali u jedan dan da nestaje sanjani san. U svoju prošlost ja ne mogu stić.
プレイステーションよ。これが RPG だ。幻想水湖伝
From Konami.
The original PlayStation was home to many classic JRPG series. Outside of more obvious examples like Final Fantasy, there were some lesser known, yet still fairly popular series like Breath of Fire, Wild Arms, and the topic of this video, the Suikoden franchise. Unlike Breath of Fire though, which originated on the Super Nintendo, and more like Wild Arms, Suikoden got its start on Sony's first foray into the console world. In fact, if you don't count games like King's Field, which are more first-person, Suikoden is actually the second JRPG ever released for the PlayStation, only behind Beyond the Beyond. And let's just say, the gap between those games' quality and their reputation among JRPG fans these days is much further apart than their gap in release date. This goes for Japan only, by the way, as in the States, the first Persona game actually came out before Suikoden, making it the third JRPG to come out in the West. In addition to this, Suikoden is one of the handful of PlayStation RPGs that actually came out before Final Fantasy VII, so it can proudly say that that game's success did not influence it in any way. It came out over a full year before it even, on December 15th, 1995 in Japan, and 1996 in North America. Suikoden was developed by Konami and was their first time making a traditional JRPG. And with how long the series lasted, along with the level of respect that fans discuss it with these days, I'd say they were pretty damn successful. When reading recommendations about JRPGs with a great story and characters, the Suikoden games are always some of the first to pop up. Sadly, while the series may not be active anymore as of now, I would argue that among JRPG fans, it's still one of the most universally respected series out there, and it all started with this one. Yeah, sure, being a 1995 game, of course it's a little dated in some aspects, but in the parts that matter the most, it holds up extremely well, and in my opinion, is one of the most replayable PS1 RPGs out there. The goal of this retrospective will be to paint a picture why it is I feel that way, while still looking at it from a fairly critical lens. I do have a lot of fond memories with this game, but I won't let nostalgia blind me here. So, with all that exposition aside, let's cut the small talk and just dive into this shit. This, my friends, is a retrospective over Suikoden. The story of Suikoden begins with the protagonist of our adventure, Sir McDull, talking to his dad Tio, who also happens to be a general in the Empire, as they get ready for an audience with the Emperor. Technically, if you're going by the game alone, it doesn't actually give the protagonist a name and lets you choose instead. However, some later Japanese-only novels did reveal that his canonical name is Tur, so for simplicity's sake, I'm just gonna refer to him as that. We then meet the Emperor of the Scarlet Moon Empire, Barbarossa, and its court magician, Wendy. We find out that Tio is a greatly respected general and is asked by Barbarossa to protect the northern border. Meanwhile, Tur will do what he can to help during his father's absence. After meeting our totally, obviously not evil commanding officer by the name of Craze, we then make our way back home. And man, let me tell you, that music you're greeted to when you do walk into your home is absolutely peak comfy vibes. Seriously, one of the most homiest and peaceful tracks out there. You just can't help but feel so relaxed and safe listening to it. Between the music and the option to mess around with your friends in some random flavor text, it just creates this really cozy feeling and makes you feel like a family. Speaking of family, in addition to Tur and Tio, we also have Pawn and Cleo, who are basically Tur's bodyguards and under orders from Tio, Ted, the hero's best friend, and finally there's Gremio, who is basically the servant of the McDull household and has an incredibly strong sense of affection and care towards our main hero. Despite his more badass appearance with that scar and shit, he's kinda like the sensitive mom of the group. Let's just say, if this world had cars and your group went out drinking, he would definitely be the DD. Anyway, after a wholesome meal with the fam, you make your way to bed and then report to Commander Craze the next morning for your first mission. Your first mission being having a Dragon Knight and their dragon fly you over to a place called Magician's Island, where you'll then meet up with the seer to collect her astrological readings. Man, I remember playing this part as a kid and it just had my imagination running wild at this point. I mean, we're already flying dragons, meeting mystical magicians, all with this really cool mix of medieval fantasy and Asian influence. It's like, yeah, there's castles and shit, but your main character is wearing a bandana and has a bow staff, and another dude is just martial arts punching bitches and stuff, and yeah, it's just really cool. Anyway, after a not so subtle foreshadow from the homie Ted, your party meets the Dragon Knight Futch, or Futch, I don't know, and ride on the back of his dragon to Magician Island. First of all, I like how your whole party's supposed to be riding on the dragon, but in the animation, no one's there. And on top of that, are we riding dragons or elephants here? Honestly, I completely forgot that they used a stock elephant sound for dragons in this game, so it kinda caught me off guard and was pretty funny. To be fair, I guess we don't really know what dragons sound like in this world, or any world for that matter, so who knows, maybe it's pretty accurate. No hate on the game either for this stuff, as I know it came out in 1995, it's just fun to point out. After arriving on the island, you meet the magician's servant, Luck, defeat his golem, and then finally meet Leknat the Seer herself, and engage in a pretty insightful conversation with her. I really like the whole dialogue here and the whole nature of how the world has a natural flow to its events, but that doesn't mean that you can't change things with your actions, as ultimately, you're the one to carve your own path and decide your own fate. It kinda reminds me of what I said in our recent video about campfires and JRPGs, about how when it comes down to it, we're all the makers of our own destiny. So yeah, this convo's some good stuff. We also get a nice little foreshadow to just how integral we're gonna be to the events of the world, but more on that later. Anyway, I'm gonna start picking up the pace now, or else I'm gonna be talking about the story for like an hour, so here's some quick bullet points. We report back to Commander Craze with the astral readings. We then get a new mission, taking care of taxes up in Rockland. After getting to Rockland, we're sent up to Mount Seifu to take care of some bandits. In doing so, we have to cross a cave, taking on a Queen Ant and her minions inside there. She ends up being a more formidable foe than the party thought, forcing Ted, in a last desperation attempt, to use, which we would later come to find out, is the Soul Eater. The Soul Eater of which being one of the 27 true runes. We don't need to get into the lore of the true runes right now, but just know they're powerful as shit and make you immortal. Fast forwarding a bit, we come to find out that Ted has had the misfortune of wandering the world for the last 300 years bearing the curse of the Soul Eater. And of course, the person who's been searching for Ted along with his true rune this entire time just so happens to be the court magician Wendy. I imagine she must stay pretty low-key as Ted doesn't know this for some reason when he gets summoned to the palace. And yeah, as you could probably guess, things don't go very well there. After a turn of events, Ted barely manages to escape, meets up with Tur, and then, seeing no other option, decides to give him the Soul Eater. Ah, sick, a cursed rune known to eat the souls close to its bearer. Just what I always wanted. Thanks, bro. Ted then stalls Wendy and them. Your party makes a break for it, and just like that, you're fugitives of the Empire. Yeah, this day didn't go as planned, you could say, but shit happens, I guess. Anyway, this is where the story essentially begins. Shortly after, you join the Liberation Army and basically just fight against society you once called home not too long ago, and yeah, things keep escalating from there. All in all, the story in Suikoden is easily one of my favorite parts about it. It's more political than most JRPGs and covers some pretty interesting topics. It's nice to get a change of pace from the typical save the world plot, you know? Like, yeah, sure, there's some strong fantasy elements here, but there's no ancient evil god you're trying to destroy. Just a corrupt ruler bent on power. Outside of some characters, I really like how there's not really a lot of black and white morality either. Much like real life, reality often exists in the gray. So yeah, the story is already interesting enough in its own right, but the characters really propel it to new heights. There are a lot of characters in this game to say the least. 108 to recruit to your side, in fact. They're not all playable, of course, but they do still contribute to the castle building aspect in some way, which I'll go into more detail on that part later. The series will refer to these characters as the 108 Stars of Destiny, directly inspired by the Chinese classical novel, Water Margin. Yeah, that's just a translated name, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the real one. Essentially, the concept is that 108 souls are born into this world where their true destinies will eventually bring them all together for a great cause. This concept is in every game and is a large part of what helps make the series so memorable. Some of your characters fight with you, others open up shops, and some just provide random, useful functions around your castle. Speaking of castle, another big feature the series is known for is the whole castle building system. As you progress through the game, eventually you reach a point where you gain access to a castle, which serves as the main headquarters for the Liberation Army. Like any army, you want to recruit new bodies to up your numbers. As you gradually recruit new people and grow your army, your castle grows with it. It's very satisfying to watch it grow throughout the game, as there's so much stuff you can do here. One of my favorite parts as a kid was recruiting new people and then going back to the castle and try to find where they would be and what they were doing. Plus, it just made it even better if they ended up offering a cool service. I would imagine a lot of people really liked the whole castle building thing, as it was just so different compared to a lot of other JRPGs of the time. Castle building and the 108 Stars of Destiny are basically synonymous with the series. If there are two things most commonly remembered about the franchise, those are probably it. Now, going into the characters in more detail, there's a lot of really great ones here. Flick and Victor are both two fan favorites for obvious reasons. They're super important to the story, they kick ass in battle, and they also return for the second game and have really big roles there as well. Victor gets a talking sword too, so that's pretty cool. The main hero is a silent protagonist, so there's not really a lot to comment about here, but I do really like his design at least. Probably my favorite main hero design in the whole series actually, and in my opinion, much better than the 1 and 2. Suikoden 2 is an amazing game, but I always felt the main hero looked a little lame. Same with 4, but that one's just an average game, so it didn't bother me as much there. Anyway, they sort of attempt to give Tur some personality with some dialogue options you can choose, but these don't affect the story at all and really just change a line or two of text. With that said, there are a few occasions where it does actually play into the story, but you'll know those moments when you get there. Regarding the villains in this game, they're okay. Not terrible, but one of the weaker parts about it to be honest. Necklord's pretty interesting, and Uber has a cool design, despite hardly being in the game at all, but it's Wendy as a main antagonist that's just kind of... She doesn't really do a whole lot to be honest, and Barbarossa's really not in that many scenes. Villains are usually some of the most compelling parts about a story to me, but I don't know. I guess this game just really didn't need them that much to still be super engaging. That says a lot about the strength of its story, setting, and other characters. As I briefly touched on earlier, I do really like the character designs in this game as a whole though. Flick, Clive, and Pezmerga are some of my favorites. They just really speak to my old 13-year-old edgelord self. I think the in-game sprites represent the character designs pretty well too. There's just a lot of charm in how they look. They're not animated as well as the second game, as that one did improve upon that aspect a lot, but they're good enough. I'll tell you what doesn't represent the character designs well though is the unfortunate English box art. Man, what the hell is going on here? I legit only recognize one person here, and that's Barbarossa. Everyone else, I don't know who the fuck they're supposed to be. I mean, I guess that's Futch riding on the dragon in the back. That might be Wendy, I think. And that guy looks like he might be Tur. But yeah, they're obviously not even close to their actual in-game designs or their instruction manual designs. It's like whoever was in charge of this had absolutely no frame of reference and was just told the game had dragons, sorcerers, and shit like that. They tried super hard to make it look as Western as possible to balance out the overly Japanese name, I guess. That may not have been their fault, as they might not have known what they were working with, but still, it's pretty interesting to look back on. Definitely a product of the 90s and their infamous box art. The Japanese cover art looks so much better, so thankfully, they rectified this issue for the second game. Cover art aside though, let's talk about the actual visuals in this game. Well, being that it came out in 1995, you can really only expect so much here. They're definitely passable and have a certain level of charm to them, like I mentioned earlier. Even though graphically, the game has more in common with SNES RPGs rather than most other PS1 RPGs, it never really felt that way to me as a kid, to be honest. Like games like Dragon Warrior 7 instantly felt dated to me when they came out, making it harder for me to get into, but this one, not at all. The sprites being a little taller might have a little something to do with it, as environment-wise, the game really doesn't have a lot going on and is a little plain. Like take the dungeons for example, quite possibly the weakest component to this game, in my opinion. They're basically just long, windy corridors with nothing that visually exciting to look at. On top of that, there's usually no puzzles or dungeon gimmicks to keep you engaged either. When it comes to dungeons, I prefer one of two design choices. They must either have a unique aesthetic that makes exploring through it interesting enough alone, or it must have some type of puzzles or gameplay gimmicks to keep it interesting. Unfortunately, Suikoden really has neither of these. Compare it to, let's say Wild Arms, another early PS1 RPG that came out before Final Fantasy VII, and in my opinion, the dungeons were a lot more fun to travel through in that game due to the tool system and the puzzles around it. I know this is just my personal preference though, as some people hate puzzles in dungeons, but yeah, I just think they could have done a little more here. It's a small fault to an otherwise incredibly fun game. Despite all that, exploration is still fun enough in this game due to how random encounters work and how fast battles are in general. Combat just moves so quickly and is something I really took for granted as a kid. Not only are the loading times between battles extremely short, but when performing regular attacks, multiple characters attack at once, making battles go by in a breeze. Like, I've played a lot of other old PS1 RPGs in the last couple years, and it's absolutely night and day how much quicker battles move as a whole here. It makes it super replayable to this day and age, a lot more so than most of its other peers. It's exactly why we decided to include it along with its sequel in our video about 8 great JRPGs that have aged really well. But wait, it gets even better too. When you run into a group of enemies that you're vastly overleveled for, you have the option to let go instead of run, increasing the escape rate to 100%. Between that and how quick the loading times are, you can seriously be in and out of battles within like 5 seconds. It's fucking awesome. And remember how I mentioned earlier about how there's a lot of characters in this game? Well, you might think it'd be a bitch to level them all up, right? Wrong actually. The way experience works in this game is that each character just needs 1,000 points to level up, and the more underleveled they are against a group of enemies, the faster they'll level up in comparison. This means even characters that are like 20 to 30 levels behind other characters can catch up to them in no time in like 5 to 10 battles tops. The devs really respected the players' time with this, and I can't thank them enough. Now, the battles themselves, they're a lot of fun. At the core, it's a pretty standard turn-based system with your typical options such as attack, defend, and use magic. Magic being known as runes in this game. There's also unite attacks, which are basically just special group attacks you can perform with a specific combination of 2 or more characters. Runes aren't quite as powerful as they are in Suikoden 2, considering each character can only equip 1 rune in this game, but some of them are still pretty strong. Flick wrecks shit with a lightning rune, for example. Physical attacks are pretty strong too, but damage output works a little differently in this game. Instead of buying new weapons at shops, you just sharpen your existing weapon at the blacksmith to increase your attack. You'll need to do this gradually throughout the game, and damn, does it get expensive. You'd have to drop mad stacks to sharpen everyone's weapon, so just focus on your heaviest hitters. Outside of the normal turn-based battle system, Suikoden also has 2 other modes of combat, giant army battles, and one-on-one duels. While really cool in concept, these pretty much just boil down to flashy forms of rock, paper, scissors. So yeah, the battles themselves may not have been super exciting, but the moments around it definitely were. These types of battles usually came at really significant parts in the story, which added a sense of gravity to an otherwise pretty basic battle. It's like, yeah, duels just came down to picking the right action based on what the other character said, but considering the weight of the situation they were based around, it just made those battles that much more exciting and impactful. What also helps some scenes feel more impactful is the music. Man, the OST in this game is so damn good. This might be a controversial opinion, but I think it may even be the best in the entire series, at least in terms of my preference. There's just so many memorable tracks here that have really stuck with me over the years. Some of the town tracks are just super cozy, and the emotional pieces hit hard, making you feel something and live in that moment. The ability to evoke that type of emotion in a player is no easy feat, so hats off to Miki Higashino and everyone else who worked on the music in this game. You guys did a phenomenal job. Alright, before I wrap this video up, there's a couple other quick nitpicks I want to mention. I'm not really a huge fan of how the inventory works in this game, as each character has their own slot of items they have. So if you have a bunch of healing items and forgot to put them on a specific character before a boss battle, well, better luck next time. Nothing personnel, kid. If this was the only inconvenience it gave way to, it would be fine, but unfortunately, it's not. At a certain point in the game, you get an item that is called the Blinking Mirror, which allows you to teleport back to your castle from wherever you're at. This is absolutely vital, otherwise there would be a lot of extra time wasted walking around or sailing around in your ship. So yeah, knowing that, get this. There are some characters that come and go through your party throughout the game, and one that ends up leaving your party permanently unless you end up collecting all 108 Stars of Destiny. So if you give the blinking mirror to one of these characters before they leave, then you're shit out of luck until you get them back. And in the specific case of that character that I won't spoil, you don't get them back until the very end of the game, only under the right conditions. So yeah, pretty big design oversight here. To avoid this, just leave that item on the main hero. Another design choice that I don't like is how you can only run when you have the Holy Rune equipped on one of your characters, or have the character stallion in your party. Considering each character can only equip one rune like I previously mentioned, this is just pretty annoying for no reason, so I'm glad they fixed it for the second game. These are just minor nitpicks though, as an overall game. If it wasn't obvious enough by now, I absolutely love it. It's such a special experience with so many great and unique ideas. The story, characters, and music are already up there with some of the best from that console generation, but with the fast-paced battle system, 3 modes of combat in general, the castle building system, and the 108 Stars of Destiny mechanic, and I think it's pretty easy to see why this one, along with the series in general, is regarded so highly. It's a type of experience you can't get anywhere else. Well, except for the second game, which is basically the same in presentation, just improved upon a lot of aspects, but you get my point. All these factors would absolutely make it worth playing today, and that short and sweet 20 to 25 hour runtime just helps make it a lot more digestible than most of its peers from back then. There's only a handful of JRPG series that I hold really close to my heart. Suikoden is definitely one of those, and my love for the franchise started right here. Thanks a bunch, Konami, for blessing us with this timeless classic. And that marks the end of this retrospective over Suikoden. Thanks a bunch for watching, everyone. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, it would mean a lot if you could either hit that like button, or even consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. How do you guys feel about this game though? Do you think it's a classic like I do? Or do you think it's a little bit overrated? Let us know in the comments below. Also, if you want to see us cover more games in the Suikoden series and videos like this, let us know about that too. As always, just want to give a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. You guys are the best. All your generosity is much appreciated. Other than that, thanks again for watching, everyone, and hope you have an awesome day. This is Gaming Productions. Until next time.